For a second. Max, I'd just like to ask another question. We were talking earlier on about Eric Schmidt from Google, and you said that's a separate case.
It is, I think so.
He clearly thinks that the economy is coming out of recession. Why do you think that he thinks that?
Because he's in a business that relies on free content that's given to him vis-a-vis Google that he doesn't have to actually pay for. It's just an algorithm and a search engine that is able to aggregate all this information, and he's able to leverage this internet and build a very fascinating business model. What he has to be leery of is that if they pass something like a law in Washington that would destroy net neutrality and you create a two-speed internet, then Google's model gets crushed. So they have to make, and they have a lot of lobbyists in Washington now to try to prevent anything that would prevent net neutrality from going forward. I'm a big supporter of the internet and the business model that comes with the internet with my company and several companies that I've started, including the Hollywood Stock Exchange that I started back in the mid-1990s, which tries to leverage the internet and bring finance to intellectual property. But the banks are the reason that Dow Jones is now over 10,000. The banks have basically committed extortion in Congress. They've given them trillions of dollars, and they've taken this money and they've used it to give themselves huge bonuses, and the fraud that was perpetrated is immense. And Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, Lloyd Blankfein should be taken down to the public square and really drawn and quartered, because they are financial terrorists of the worst kind.
Well, so are you in that case.
Frederick,
I mean,
no,
please, I'm just
talking
kidnapping
about
the media here.
I'm talking about.
What I'm saying is, those banks, if someone is responsible for this action and what you criticize, it is the public sector, right? Because all you needed to do is actually get a stake in those banks and operate them and manage them. Get seats in the board and just
how come Warren Buffett
things.
gets a sweetheart deal from Goldman Sachs? He gets 10% on his preferred, plus he's got a sweetheart deal and he's making billions. Meanwhile, the American public is getting an absolute horrible deal. They bought back some of these warrants at a price that was ridiculously cheap vis-a-vis their deal. So why is Warren Buffett is public enemy #1 as far as I'm concerned, because he puts forth this idea that the system in the U.S. is fair and somehow just, and yet it's not. It's run completely in a corrupt way. Warren Buffett really is somebody that we should take a closer look at, because he's putting forth this American dream model that's simply not there anymore, and he himself has extracted an incredibly leveraged deal from Goldman Sachs.
I'd just like to move things on a little bit again. What is the evidence for you that the economy really is beginning to move out of recession?
Well, the thing is, there's a subtle trade-off that we've been facing recently, which is between latent risk on the one hand and the realized turbulence, the turmoil, right? What we've done so far is, by increasing leverage, we've increased the latent risk by increasing leverage, by having this huge private-to-public debt transfer in favor of dampening the realized volatility. That's what we've done so far. So now the room for action has dramatically shrunk. That's the problem we're facing. So yes, we are steering progressively the economy back from the brink, but it will take time for this to be really robust. And what I fear is not a double dip, but that growth is really protracted.
So what do you say? You saying the Max is expecting too much too soon, or?
Well, I think he focuses just too much on the banks and the...
It's not latent risk. He's talking latent risk. We're talking to the people who are losing their homes, losing their jobs. Wages are down. Yeah. The economy is shrinking. Well, that's not latent risk. That's actual risk. People are really dying because of Wall Street jihadis that are blowing up the economy. People are dying.
Frederick, to go back to the beginning of all this.
From the ivory tower, things may look a little bit
reality is
cleaner.
More nuanced. That's the problem.
In the ivory tower, things are perhaps looking less nuanced to you, but on the ground, people are actually starving and dying because of the kind
of language that you're using. True issues, and not just the upper crust type, bonuses related sort of subjects.
Don't you feel bad because at night when you go to sleep knowing that this kind of rhetoric is destroying people's lives?
No, what I feel bad about is people just focus on subject without substance.
The reality of it is that people are dying because of JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Wall Street jihadis.
Right now is that the problem is the stimulus addressed the immediate needs of the economy. The reform, the more fundamental issues still need to be addressed.
Defined by who?
This all started with
the bankers who work for the bankers. That's
Not
complete
bankers,
hogwash.
analysts.
They created the problem. They got the extortionary money, and they took it in their pocket.
Commentators.
How can they have a record bonuses if they didn't steal that money?
If we could go back right to the beginning of all this,
problem.
just one sec. If we could go back to the beginning of all this, started with the crash in the housing market, is there any sign at all that the housing market is beginning to recover?
Well, it is. It's actually reached the bottom. Now, we need to see just how resilient that market is, because, again, that's an artifact of liquidity injections. What we've done so far, we've had the Fed buying in excess of $700 billion of mortgage securities.
Yeah.
So that has dramatically smoothened things for the public and for homeowners.
That's a misstatement. It hasn't bottomed.
The Fed enabled homeowners to refinance, which was absolutely impossible months ago.
You're delusionary.
So that's a tremendous
You're delusionary.
progress.
You're
really
delusionary. Prices have not bottomed. The real estate market has not bottomed. The delinquencies and foreclosures are skyrocketing. That's not a sign of a real estate market that's bottoming. It's just more, wishful thinking and putting a positive spin and justification for bonuses that should never be paid unless you want to start paying the other terrorists. Why not give Osama bin Laden a bonus for the great work he did on 9/11? I mean, that's the same thing as giving J.P. Morgan a bonus or Goldman Sachs a bonus. They're all terrorists. They're all destroying the economy. One uses derivatives. One uses airplanes. They're the same thing.
Is the main risk that is carried now. If we still focus on the upper crust, we'll never get there. Now the economy is actually back on the brink. It's gone from a potential renewed Great Depression to a Great Recession, how it's called now. Well, we just need to implement the structural reforms that are needed to make it sustainable.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there. We've run completely out of time. Thanks very much to our guests. Do join us again next week for another edition of Face Off here on France 24. Have a good weekend. Bye.